my top priority pickup of this week is going to be Joan Jennings, right? This guy, you probably picked him up. He's exploded those couple weeks. You picked him up, and then you probably dropped him. Romeo Doubs for the Green Bay Packers. This guy needs to be rostered.
It sounds crazy, but I do think he is the best receiver on the Packers. Ray Davis is the #1 handcuff for running backs. Hunter Henry is tight end 5 right now, and he's only rostered in 20% of leagues. Go out and get him.
Keep an eye out on these waiver wires because you might find a league winner out there.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Catching a Vibe. I'm your host, Drew. I may look a little different, but I'm Drew. Got my co-host, Mike, here. Mike, it's week 8. How are we feeling?
Happy to be back, ready to get this going. Man, it's tough. It's tough out there. The injuries are piling up. I mean, you're really going to have to put on your manager's hat and try to navigate through all these injuries that are going on in the NFL. I mean, the waiver wires are so picked through that I'm not crazy about this week. I'm really just going to go over some of these players that I think you kind of need to pick up or you had and dropped. Get them back on your team because of the way these injuries are happening. You really got to have some depth on your bench. So, I mean, it's just that week. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I haven't seen a season where so many players are going down with season-ending injuries, hamstrings where they're out multiple weeks. So you really got to, keep an eye out on these waiver wires because you might find a league winner out there on these waiver wires.
So we're going to go over the waiver wire. Then we're going to do a trade segment again. I'm going to give you some players, and we're going to debate if you should trade for or trade away.
All right, sounds good.
All right, we'll start with the waiver wire. And my first guy, I'm going to go with the quarterback position, Drake May. Drake has had back-to-back good weeks. He had 19 2 weeks ago, and yesterday he had 20 points. He's thrown the ball a lot, and with some of these top-tier quarterbacks struggling, I would get Drake May because, the Patriots stink, and they're going to be throwing the ball a lot, and they're going to be down in most of their games. So that gives Drake high potential to have good weeks in fantasy.
Well, I agree with you. We mentioned him last week with New England needing to throw the ball, and he's a young guy that's not afraid to throw it around. I agree with you. I like that, especially look at Mahomes. I think his best game of this year has been 17 points. Drake May had, 20 points this last weekend?
And 19 the week before.
These guys are outperforming Patrick Mahomes. So, the waiver wire is a perfect place to pick up a quarterback. I agree with you. So, my top priority pickup of this week is going to be Joan Jennings, right? This guy, you probably picked him up. He's exploded those couple weeks. You picked him up, and then you probably dropped him because he was hurt, and Ayuk started picking up a lot. And so I'm going to recommend you going out and picking him up because Brandon Ayuk looked like he had a pretty bad knee injury. He could possibly be out
for the year.
He could possibly be out for the year. Yeah, so Jennings is definitely the guy that you should go out to get. Or the other receiver on the 49ers, Ricky Pearsall. He got shot and he played this last weekend. He had the most snaps out of all the receivers out on the field. He played 48 snaps of 63. 76% he was out on the field. So he's going to see a little decent amount of action out there with Ayuk being out and Debo. He's in and out of the games half the time. And so I like the 49ers wide receivers. I'm going to recommend going out and getting those guys.
Yeah, and I want to mention Russell Wilson too. He just started for the Steelers, and it didn't start off good, but it ended pretty good. 264 yards and 2 touchdowns. They won big against the Jets, and I think Tomlin's going to stick with Russ for the rest of the year because people are forgetting Russ had a decent year last year. Just Sean Payton and him butted heads, so that's why he's in Pittsburgh, and that was the best I've seen the Steelers offense look this year. Last night,
Yeah, I agree. He's the best thrower of the football on this team. Yeah, Justin Fields is an incredible athlete, and he's manageable, and he can get the job done. But Pittsburgh is a more explosive offense with Russell Wilson, being the starting quarterback. So
Yeah.
I agree there. So I'm going to throw out kind of my second priority guy to go get, who's surprisingly only rostered in 37%, Romeo Doubs for the Green Bay Packers. This guy needs to be rostered. He's on a great offense, and he saw 10 targets this last week, 8 receptions, 94 yards. I think he's the number one receiver on this team as far as targets goes. He's probably not as high as production-wise guy, but targets are going to equate to points. This is a guy I want to have. I like Romeo Doubs. I mean, he played 48 snaps out of 58. That's 83%. He was on the field more than any other player on Green Bay. So he's the guy I want to get.
Yeah, he's probably my number one guy to get off waiver wires. Like you said, only roster in 30% of leagues, and this sounds crazy, but I do think he is the best receiver on the Packers. I know Jaylen Reed's been really good, but I think Reed's just a playmaker. Like, they have him run receiver sweeps and all that. I just think Romeo is the number one guy there, and he is a must-have on your team. Even bench him, have him on your bench.
Right. He's the consistent player on that team. To me, I think that Jaylen Reed reminds me of Devon Anan from Miami last year, where he's just so explosive on all these plays. Romeo's just consistent. He gets production. So that's why I like Romeo Doubs.
All right.
I want to mention just a couple guys. Obviously, Ray Davis from Buffalo. He's looked great when he's got in there. He's only rostered in 14% of the leagues, which is crazy considering that he's had some pretty good weeks these last couple weeks. He scored 18 points and 11 fantasy points the last 2 weeks. So I think he's a guy to look at. And Ty Johnson from the same team, Buffalo, are 2 guys that I would look at trying to put on your team to have some running back depth on your bench.
I think Ray Davis is the number one handcuff for running backs. James Cook is banged up right now, and Ray Davis has looked good. He had 20 carries for 97 yards in his one start. So he's the number one handcuff, I think. A receiver is Cedric Tillman. Amari Cooper's gone. So we don't really know who's the receiver one for the Cleveland Browns, but I think it just depends on who's the quarterback that starts. If DTR starts the rest of the year, I think Tillman's going to have a big year because DTR is a guy who throws the ball right away and throws it short. He threw the ball 12 times at Tillman. He had 8 catches for 80 yards. I think Tillman is worth a guy to keep your eye out for if you need an extra receiver.
He's definitely a guy I would keep an eye on for this, even if Jameis Winston gets in there. Jameis Winston loves throwing the ball too. He might throw it to the other team, but he does love throwing the ball around. So Cedric Tillman is a pretty good athlete. I think he's a guy that you should look at and, hey, put on the bench. Because like we said, these waiver wires are really picked apart with all these injuries. There's not that many superstars out there with all these injuries.
Yeah.
Another guy I want to mention is Kamani Vidal from the Chargers, which I want this guy because he's probably the RB. He's definitely the RB2 on this team, and it's a run-heavy team. I want to have this guy, especially with J.K. Dobbins' injury problems he's had. I think he's a guy you want to go grab up and put on your roster just in case. I don't want Dobbins to get hurt, but you never know. He'd be a good player to have on your team, especially on a team that runs the ball the highest rate in the NFL.
Yeah. My next guy, I have Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry is tight end 5 right now, and he's only rostered in 20% of leagues. Go out and get him with how bad the tight end position has been this year. You get a guy, tight end 5 off the waiver wire. That is a huge steal. He just had 8 catches for 92 yards, and rookie quarterbacks love tight ends. So I would get Hunter Henry if you have a bad tight end right now, and with how bad the position has been for fantasy.
Yeah, I agree. I would get Hunter Henry also. You're right. He's the best receiver, I think, on that team just because these other guys are fighting for position on this team. Hunter Henry's the safe play on the New England Patriots. I would grab him up.
Mm-hmm. And an honorable mention is Jonnu Smith, the Dolphins tight end, because last game he had 7 catches for 96 yards and a touchdown versus the Colts. Tua is coming back, so I think this Dolphins offense is going to be a lot better than it's been since Tua got hurt.
Yeah, so I got one more receiver, Keon Coleman. He's not rostered very high. I think he might start getting a little bump in action here. He'd be a guy worth looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's had a couple boom games, I guess to say. He'd be a guy I'd look at.
He just had his first 100-yard game. So
Yeah. So I would think he'd be a guy I'd want to go look at.
All right, now our trade segment. And the first guy I have is Devon Anan, the Dolphins running back. Would you trade for or trade away?
I would test your league mate to see what you can get for him. I'd like to trade him away. Like I thought at the beginning of the year, there's no way he can sustain that high quality. What was he getting 10 yards a carry last year? He's just a small guy that he can't sustain running up the middle. He's going to get banged up. And this team is, who knows? I mean, it's no guarantee if Tua comes back that this offense is going to click again. So if you still can get a decent value for A-Chain, I would look at trying to get rid of him. He would be a trade.
Mm-hmm. I think I would trade for him, actually, because I think, I'm not saying Tua is going to be 100%, but it's going to be better than Huntley and Skylar Thompson and Tim Boyle, the guy who has 5 more touchdowns than a grocery man on the street. So, I mean, he's out snapping Mostert, right? He had 40 snaps last week. I think he's a playmaker. And when Tua was starting, they threw the ball a lot to Achane. So that's why I like him.
That's the best part about him is, yes, he's going to get those receptions. So, yes, he has value in the market. But for me, I want to trade to try to get a little better guy. I want more touches. I want a guy that touches the ball more.
Okay. All right. My second guy is Najee Harris. What would you do with Najee Harris?
Depends on. He'd be a guy I would try to trade for just because of the stability at the running back position. He touches the ball a lot. That's hard to find in running backs nowadays as far as platooning and our running back by committees. So he's been pretty much the stable play. Plus, I think if Russell can get this team to move the ball down, he's going to get a lot of red zone carries, opportunities, scoring touchdowns. So I think that gives him a little bump. So if you don't give up too much to try to get him, I wouldn't mind having him as an RB2 or a flex with bye weeks coming in. So he'd be a guy I wouldn't mind trading for.
Yeah, I would trade for him as well. Back-to-back 100-yard games for Najee. He had 14 for 106 2 weeks ago. Then he had 21 for 102. In both those games, he scored a touchdown. From week 7 to week 18 last year, he averaged 16 points per game. And Najee, the past 2 years, has finished strong. Like, he always started off bad, then he finished strong.
Exactly.
And I think he's going to be a reliable running back too, or even flex. I don't think his value is too high yet. So I think you could get him.
He's the guy that's got the high floor, kind of a low ceiling, but I want the stability of getting points. This guy goes out and plays all the time. So, yeah, I would trade for him.
Yeah. George Kittle.
Trade for.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, he's tight end one. That's the position I want to get better at. I love this guy. He just goes out there and works hard. With Ayuk's injury, this is probably going to give him a bump. If you can work a trade with your league mates and try to swindle him, I would definitely go get him. You might have to pay a king's ransom, but if your roster looks good and you think that this is going to shore up your roster, I would definitely go get George Kittle.
100% agree with you there. Chuba Hubbard.
He's one of those guys I would try to trade away because he's been super efficient and he's been putting up big numbers. Who knows what Jonathan Brooks is going to bring to the table? Is he going to eat up some of his playing time? So if you can get a high return value for the trade, I would trade him away. I'd kind of like to bolster at the receiver position if you're hurt and you can get a good receiver too, wide receiver two, or a flex play receiver. I would trade him away to get that.
I agree with you there. And Andy Dalton doesn't look like the red rifle anymore. The last 3 games, he had 3, 14, and he didn't even score a single point versus the Commanders. And that worries. It should worry Hubbard owners because you'll be hoping he just gets garbage time points, and that's not sustainable.
Yes, right.
All right. My next guy is Alvin Kamara.
This is tough. I mean, the Saints are so banged up and injured and hurt. And he looks pretty much disgusted. I even heard that rumors or trades are out there. So, if that's a hard guy to hammer down. I mean, if you could trade for him and get a low value for him, I would trade for him. But if you can still get a high market for him, I would trade him away just because it's Alvin Kamara. And if you can get, upgrade your receiver or something like that for him, I would try trading him away.
Yeah, I think I would trade him away. He's RB2 right now. I don't see him finishing as RB2 with how banged up that Saints offense is. And the Saints are big-time frauds. Everybody was ready to call them Super Bowl champions after 2 weeks, and they haven't won a game since. So
right.
I would trade Alvin Kamara.
Yeah.
And my last guy is Jaylen Reed. We were just talking about the Packers. Now we're talking about the other receiver.
Right. Like I said earlier, I think it's hard for him to sustain that high efficiency that he's had. And I think he's a trade away guy only because I think you can get good value for him. You can get 2 players for one with what you have in on him. I would try trading him away because I do like Dobbs a little bit better than him. I think Dobbs is going to produce a little more, I think, down the stretch. Yeah. So I would try trading Reed away.
Yeah, I'm there with you. It's just the Packers receiver room is just so crowded. Like Dobbs, he's been getting the most targets. Then Wicks has been making plays, and Watson, he casually makes a play here and there. He's a second-round pick, so they're not just going to kick him to the curb. So Reed's a top 10 or top 7 fantasy receiver right now. So I think you could get somebody good for him.
You could definitely get good value for him. And you're right with, 1 week it's this guy, next week it's this guy. He's going to lose production here and there because of these other guys are going to have good weeks. So I agree.
Yeah. So that wraps up the Week 8 waiver wire video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. And if you're new here, please subscribe. Road to 1,000 subscribers. Would really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, help us out, please.
Yeah. Thanks. See you next time. Peace.